Good morning. Give me a second. Still working on getting set up. I think. Is this right? All right, we're good. We're good. So, it has been said that in order to really reach somebody and affect change in their life, you have to speak to them, or you have to reach them in three different ways. The three different areas: the head, the heart, and the hands. So head meaning that what you hear, what is said, you understand it. Like intellectually, it makes sense. You grasp it, and why you can't stop there is because just because something makes sense to you doesn't mean it changes you. Or just because you know something, that's not always going to move you to action. But heart, that means you are gripped by the significance of it. You understand now, not just intellectually, but why this should change you, why this should affect you. And so you become affected rather than just informed. But then you get to hands. Now, hands is where the action takes place. You see the implications of what you know. You understand the significance of it, and you're determined to act. You step out into practice. We actually see one verse that demonstrates this perfectly in Acts. Acts chapter 2, verse 37 says this: "When the people heard this, they were cut to the heart and said to Peter and the other apostles, 'Brothers, what shall we do?'" So when they heard it, so this is that getting the mind, capturing the mind, that's the head. When they heard this, it made sense to them. They were cut to the heart. So it affected their heart immediately. They were cut. They felt it. They felt the significance of what they were saying. And then they ask, what do we do? What do we do next? How now do we put this into practice? And so we're in the series right now, what matters to the 45030? If you don't live in Harrison, that's the zip code here. What matters to the people here, to where we live, the people who live here, in this area? Like, what is significant to us? And there's a lot of things. There's, of course, marriage, family, parenting, purpose and significance, finding rest. I know, especially for families with kids and several kids, like overcommitment, what you feel is overcommitment to activities. How do we find rest? How do we establish boundaries? And those are all things that we're going to get to in this series: parenting, family, marriage, boundaries, rest. We're going to get to all of that. But what we started last week, and why we started there, was especially with the election season coming up, at the top of the list of primary concerns for Americans was an overwhelming one, and it was the economy. It was money. And so if the economy is a primary concern of ours, said that can be something that's uncomfortable to talk about in church, but if it's an issue of primary concern, we want to address issues of primary concern. If marriage is an issue of primary concern, you want the church to talk about it. If you want to be a better parent, that's an issue of your primary concern, you want the church to talk about it. Finding purpose, significance, balance, boundary, like you want the church to talk about these things. For some reason, when it comes to money, though, it's hard. That's an issue of primary concern that can be very uncomfortable for us to talk about in church. But guess what? We're going to do it anyway. So within the church, like last week, what we started talking about was our personal stewardship. But we attacked it of those three, head, heart, and hands, we really went for the heart last week. That was kind of the painful one, where it was, all right, we have to discover, what do I really think about money? What do I really believe about money? Is this an area of my life that I'm not really ready to fully give over yet? So that was the painful one, where it was the heart. And what in our lives what is keeping us from living kind of a biblically instructed or informed life when it comes to our stewardship? This week is more of a fun one. As you can see, I have balls. So this week is going to be more fun. It's going to be a little bit of head and some hands. This one's going to be practical. And one of the things that we started with last week was we talked about your worldview. Right? Your worldview is the lens, like the filter that you wear, that you always have on, that informs how you think about the world. It's been developed through past experiences, the way that you were raised, your ideology, your theology, even just what you absorb in society around you that you process unconsciously. And then what you do is your worldview helps you make sense of that. And so then you can order the world in a fashion so you attempt to understand the world as it is. Now this worldview, it influences how you think about everything. It influences how you think about relationships, how you think about marriage, how you think about work, how you think about God, how you think about religion, and it definitely influences how you think about money. People with different worldviews can be looking at the same exact thing and view it very, very differently. This became super apparent to me when I joined the Army. I went to basic training, and when I was there were people who were raised in a context and a culture that I knew nothing about. Like one of my friends became a really good friend. I actually, he had a really cool name. His name was Sam Slaughter. Like that was his real name. Sam was born in Jackson, Mississippi, in the projects. Essentially, he was like, where I'm from, he's like, we don't even see white people. He's like, there are no white people here. He's like, being in basic training, this is the most white people I've ever been around at one point in my entire life. And I was like, okay, I was raised around mostly white people, so obviously we were raised differently. But he was raised in the projects, extreme poverty, never knew his dad. His mom was in and out. He bounced around house to house, living with family. And so when it came to understanding the context of family, versus me, who was raised with a mom and a dad who were always there, we could be looking and talking about family, talking about the same thing, but view it very, very differently and have different ideas on what family is. So that's an example of how your worldview affects how you see and you look at something. You see something, and based on your worldview, you can be looking at the same exact thing, but viewing it differently. So for Christians, we try our best to view our world through a biblical, Christian, gospel-informed worldview. By the grace of God, by the Spirit within us, we want to look at everything, culture around us, everything that we take in, we want to absorb that and filter that through the lens and through the truth of God's Word. So when it comes to money then, we should fundamentally think about money differently than people who aren't viewing the world through a biblical lens. We don't live for money. We don't serve money. Of course, we need money. Money is not inherently a bad thing, but money should not be the highest pursuit of our lives. Now, like I said, it can be uncomfortable to talk about, but I think that's part of the reason Jesus talked about it so much. As we discovered last week, Jesus talked about money more than he talked about heaven. Of his parables, 25% of them, his most illustrative, memorable stories, 25% talked about money. And I think he did this because he understands the power and the influence and the appeal that money naturally has over people. But money, just like these chairs and these tables and these balls and these baskets, money, though more significant in our lives than all of those things, it's still just a thing. It is a thing given to us by God to then be used for his purpose and his glory. So it's entrusted to us by God. We are blessed with it from his provision. It is then on us to use it wisely as he instructed for his purpose and for his glory. Now, to do that, to think differently, to think through the biblical lens, we unpacked kind of 4 foundational truths of a Christian worldview, of a biblical worldview. And they are these. First one, at the center of the universe is a God of incalculable glory. That there is a God who is worthy of our worship, he's worthy of our lives, and we have to first understand this, that there is a God that is worthy of everything. He created everything, he sustains everything, he provides for us. He is a God of glory that we cannot fully comprehend, that the universe does not revolve around us, but there's a God that the universe does revolve around, and he's the one who created it all, and he is worthy of our worship. But secondly, we live in a world terribly broken by sin. So even with our gospel lens on, even with this, like, trying our best and by the grace of God, seeing the world through a biblical and a Christian worldview, we are still vulnerable and affected by sin. And because of that, it affects the way that we see the world. So our worldview, as we mature, it may get more consistent. As we mature in our relationship with Jesus, it should get more consistent with the gospel. But our worldview is not consistent all the time with the gospel and what we say we believe, because we are affected by the sin in the world around us, and we are affected by the sin in our own lives. So understanding that we're living in a world terribly affected by sin, we are still affected by sin, and so we don't always view everything rightly. I think we can all agree with that we still, to this day, we don't always see everything rightly. We often see things the way that we want to see them, don't we? It's not just money, but this is in relationships and every area. Like, why can't this person just see this from my perspective? Like, we want people to see the world the way that we see the world, and we want the world to be the way that we think it is. So how do we get past this? Well, it comes from a heart change, and heart change can't be manufactured on our own. Good news, though, God offers us his heart and his life-transforming grace. So as a gift from God, God offers to transform our hearts for us when we surrender to him. Left up to our own, we would never willingly on our own choose to make God our primary pursuit in life, to surrender our lives to him, but by his grace, he demonstrates his love for us. He transforms our hearts, and as he does that, and as we grow in our relationship with him, and as we mature, we start to view the world differently. The gospel starts to become our worldview, which leads us to, we were created to live something bigger than ourselves. Like, we cannot downplay this or overestimate the importance of this statement when it comes to a biblical worldview, especially regarding our money. That our lives have a greater purpose than our own comfort, our own self-willed purpose, and that greater purpose is to be connected, or that even everything that we view, so that purpose is to be connected to our money, and that money is connected to our greater purpose, which is ultimately to bring glory to God. So everything in our lives are connected to, we were created to live for something bigger than ourselves. And it is through these four, I want to say, foundational truths. At the center of the universe is a God of incalculable glory. We live in a world terribly broken by sin. God offers us his heart and life-transforming grace, and we were created to live for something bigger than ourselves. Through this, as we process that and think that through and allow God to work in our lives, and we believe that, then we start to see the world differently. However, regarding the management of our personal finances, our personal stewardship, it's a critical component in the life of a follower of Jesus. It's a critical component in the life of a believer, and it very often is the last one that people will participate in, which is why it's so pivotal that when people begin giving, when people begin tithing, you start to see that God's really transforming them in their lives. Now, one of the things we looked at, I actually provided it for you this week. I didn't last week because I didn't have room, but there's a graphic on your notes on your guide. What happens when believers tithe regularly? What happens when you give to the church? When you're following, kind of as we unpacked last week, God's instruction within stewardship in your life. And the first, what all of this does is provide resources for God's kingdom work. So on this graphic, I think it's the next slide, yeah. So first is God's kingdom worship. So within kingdom worship, this gives us the opportunity to gather here. We can turn the lights on. We have chairs to sit in. We have a place to be. I know up until this week, you didn't want to be outside on a Sunday morning having worship. This morning, it actually sounds great. We could all be outside and it'd be fantastic, right? But what this kingdom worship, as you support, as you tithe, as you give, it gives us the ability to do things like this, to gather together, to worship to have a place to come and to serve, to use your gifts, to plug into a church, to do life together. This is the kingdom resources that allow us to gather as a local body. But secondly, kingdom mission. This is how we are able to participate in God's activity, not just here, but around the world. It's how we make disciples, how we engage our community, how we serve our community, meet the needs of our community, how we're able to be involved in church planting. So we are still a church plant. We're about 19 months old now. We're about 19 months old, and we have benefited from churches all over the country that want to be a part of what we're doing here. So what we call our sending church, some of you know, I was a church planting resident on staff at a church in South Carolina called Cornerstone. I was on staff there very specifically for one reason, to be developed and trained to then be sent out to plant and pastor a new church. Because that's part of their vision. They believe in church planting so much, they make it a staff position to train somebody, and then they send them out. And I wasn't the first person to go through that. I was the third. First one was Will Forrest. Will Forrest went through several years before I did. Then he left Cornerstone, went to Seattle, and planted a church. And then Will Cole, I know, I was the first one that wasn't Will. Then Will Cole, he came in, was there for several years. He left and he went to Pittsburgh and planted a church. And then it was like 2 days after Will went to Pittsburgh, my family pulled in to Florence, South Carolina. And not only do they bring us on staff and develop us there and invest into us, but then they agree to send us to a new city and help support us financially for the first 5 years of the life of our church. So not supporting me personally, but supporting the church financially. But they're not the only church to do that. Of those churches of Cornerstone, which planted, guess what? The church that they planted in Seattle, they've supported us financially. The church that Cornerstone planted in Pittsburgh, they supported us financially. Then we have churches in Columbus, Atlanta, Tennessee. We have churches all over the country, about a handful of churches that believe in what we're doing at Grace, and they're able to support and participate in what we're doing here because the people there believe in it too, and they give. And from that giving, they're able to participate in God's kingdom mission all over the world. We actually started doing this from day one. The very first Sunday we launched, we dedicated 1% of our internal giving to give to church plants. Year one, we gave to Restoration Church in Middletown. Now we're giving 1% of our internal giving to Graceland Church Dearborn, and it's about 20 minutes away from here. They're only about 1 year younger than us, but this is who we are. We're not just going to say that, hey, we believe in this, we want to be a part of it, but we're going to do it. We're going to be intentionally involved with church planting. And my hope is that someday, just as Cornerstone was able to send church plants out, we're able to do the same thing. We have a very small account, it's not significant at all right now, called Missions Reserve, and I hope to use that someday at Grace to fund a residency to where we can send a church plant. If we can't fund a residency, then at least use it as seed money to gather some people here who feel called to plant a church somewhere else, and then we're able to send them out and support them. This is what being a part of the kingdom mission is, that we're not just trying to build the kingdom of Grace, but we want to build the kingdom of God, and we want to play a part in that as much as we can and as significantly as we can through the obedience of our giving and our going. But then lastly is kingdom workers. So this is where we support missionaries, church planters, pastors, people who work in the church, supporting people who have invested their lives to serving within the church and serving the people of the church. Now, in the New Testament, this is just kind of assumed. In the New Testament, it's assumed that people within the local church will tithe to support the ministries and to support the local church, as well as being a part of planting and creating new churches and supporting missions around the world. We know, though, everyone doesn't do this. As we looked last week, of regular churchgoers, it was a survey of regular churchgoers, about 60% of people who attend church regularly participate in this minimally or at all. 60%, between 60% give anywhere from 0 to 3% regularly. So only about 40% of regular churchgoers are at that 10% or more. Now, when you hear this, I want to reiterate again, I have no idea who gives what here. I don't see the number. I don't know who gives what or how much. I've never seen it. I won't see it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to know. I really don't. I see the overall number, so then I know how to lead and plan and be like, okay, we have to make some changes, but I don't know who gives what. This is not me trying to guilt you into giving or anything like that, because guilt is only a motivator for a very short amount of time. Once the guilt is kind of gone, then you revert back to your old ways, which is why we talked about the heart. So we want to see what God has to talk about when it comes to his instruction for our finances and our personal stewardship. So when it comes to practically living this out, when it comes to living out God's plan for our stewardship and wisely managing our finances or our financial situation, what does that look like? Here's our key principle for today. God's stewardship plan requires obedience, intentionality, and consistency. Obedience, intentionality, and consistency. From Scripture, we see God's expectation and his instruction for us that the starting point is the tithe. So 10% of your income is what God instructs to be given to the local church. So the first question is, if you agree with if you agree with that is God's instruction, the question then becomes, will I obey it? Like, everything belongs to God. I think we recognize that. Everything is God's, the universe is God's. Since everything belongs to him, he holds your life in his hand. And since he holds his life in your hand, or his hand, then he holds everything that you own in his hand. So as a steward then, you are then entrusted with money that he blesses you with through his gracious provision. You then manage it or steward it in alignment with his will. You manage what is his to bring him glory. Meaning you using everything that you have, you surrender your life to him, and your life is to point people to Jesus and to advance his kingdom. Now, tithing, this isn't something that you just fall into. Like, nobody grows closer to God on accident, right? Like, in order to grow in a relationship, we pursue one intentionally. Very similar to tithing. Like, we don't just grow into a maturing and dynamic relationship with God by accident, but we make a decision to. It happens through obedience, it happens through intentionality, and it happens through consistency. So for the sake of our time together this morning, I'm not going to preach last week's sermon again, so for the sake of our time together this morning, let's assume that we all understand obedience and tithing is necessary, all right? We're just going to make that assumption so we can keep going, all right? So if we assume that obedience and tithing is necessary, what happens next? All right, well, we have obedience, so what happens next is intentional. We must be intentional. It requires making intentional decisions on your part to do what you believe is true. It's a hard thing to do. Especially getting started. Like if giving has never been a part of what you've done, or you're just hearing this for the first time, it's a very hard practice or personal discipline to just start with. You may have to make some adjustments to how you manage your money and to begin intentionally living out what you believe. But to act with intention involves setting a clear direction and taking the necessary steps to get there. Setting a clear direction, a clear goal, and taking the steps to move closer to that desired outcome. So acting with intention means we change the way that we think, we change our words, our behaviors, and our thoughts to get in alignment with our goal. So if our desire is to be obedient to what we believe is true, to be obedient to the Word of God, then we have to take the necessary steps to get there. It's about taking deliberate action rather than just reacting to circumstances. For the past several months, I had a goal that I wanted to hit. It was a bench pressing goal. There's just this totally irrelevant, like it doesn't matter to anybody in here, but personally, I was like, there's a number I want to hit, and I'm going for it. Never hit that number in my life, and in order to do something that I had never done before, I had to do stuff that I had never done before. I had to eat more than I normally ate, which actually wasn't the bad part. I enjoyed that part. But I had to eat more than normal. I had to change the way that I lift and work out, and I had to have somebody there with me. Grant was actually there with me, and we would go in, we would lift. I'd try to get that number, and time again, I'd fail. Like, I'd go for that number, fail. Go for the number again, fail. And I failed over and over again. And there's kind of a lesson in that too. Just because you fail at something doesn't mean you quit or you just stop the process. It means you fail one day, guess what? Get back on it tomorrow. Go again. Just keep persevering. And so I went and I was eating, I was working out, I was doing everything to hit this very specific goal. And then finally, one day, I got it. And now I have a different goal. Now I realized that I don't need to be lifting this much weight anymore. I hit the goal, I'm good. Now I want to lose a little bit of weight. I want to be able to move better. I want to be like, my son plays baseball. I want to be able to run around the field with him and do those kinds of things. So to reach one goal, I had to eat more, had to work out a very specific way. To reach a different goal, I have to do something different. I have to change my habits. I have to eat less. I have to add cardio, and I just hate it so much. I just hate cardio so bad. But in order to do these, to reach this new goal, I have to take the necessary steps to reach that desired outcome. It takes purposeful steps within my behavior. So if our desired outcome, again, is to be obedient to the Lord regarding our personal stewardship, then we have to be intentional and take the necessary steps to reach that goal. It doesn't just happen. It requires intention. But not just intention, but it takes doing so consistently. That committing yourself to just, you know what, I'm going to go try this one time and see what happens, that's not where you're going to see change. But consistently taking necessary steps and being intentional about it, making it a habit, that's how you're going to reach your goal. Again, growing in your relationship with Jesus. If you only come to church on a Sunday, and if it's something that you've never done, that's a good starting point. But if your desire is a growing and a thriving relationship with God, it's going to take more than just showing up on a Sunday. It's going to take daily being in prayer and being in the Word. It's a consistency within your lifestyle to see that change happen. When I was benching, if all I did was go in once a month or twice a month and just see how much weight I could throw up on a bench, I'm never going to see any progress there. The person who makes progress when they want to lose weight or they want to get healthier, it's not just paying for an expensive gym membership and crash dieting for a few days, but it's consistently putting into practice what you know to be true and showing up every single day. So consistently in it. So just like in saving money. If you want to save money, but you just go out and buy whatever you want to buy throughout the month, regardless of how much it costs, and then you're like, you know what, at the end of the month, I'm just going to save whatever money I have left over, you are not going to build your savings or be in a healthy financial situation as someone who proactively saves and builds a budget at the beginning of the month. We know these things to be true, that it takes our obedience, it takes our intention. We actually have to put those steps and then to consistently practice what we know to be true. So obedience, intentionality, and consistency. Now, when we think about this, what does God tell us, or what are some of the instruction God gives us about wisely managing our finances and stewarding with what he blesses us with? Proverbs 27, we've got it up there. Proverbs 27, 23 to 27. It says, know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds. So I don't think we have any shepherds in here, but I think we understand what the writer's saying. He's like, know well the condition of your flock. Pay attention to what you have. Pay attention to what you are responsible for. Pay attention to your property. Know what's going on around you. So know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds. For riches do not last forever, and does a crown endure to all generations? When the grass is gone and new growth appears and the vegetation of the mountains is gathered, The lambs will provide your clothing, and the goats the price of a field. There will be enough goat's milk for your food and for the food for your household. I think the principle that we see here is know the value of what you have and manage it well. I think when you were a kid, your parents, if your parents were anything like mine, they probably said this to you. I say the same thing to my son, and he will say it to his son. Hey, take care of what you have. I know my dad, I used to hear that all the time if it was my baseball glove. If I left my baseball glove outside and it got rained on and then it got water, like it's terrible for a baseball glove. And that was the first time I very specifically hearing my dad say, hey, that's your glove. Take care of what you have. This proverb is God saying, take care of what you have. Know what you have, know how to care for it, and take care of it. Like what you have won't last forever. Your wealth won't last forever. It comes and goes. But if you care for what you have, if you plan to wisely use what you have, use it well and you won't squander it. Know what you have and take care of it. Because everything that you have, what you currently have, the Lord has blessed you with. So be thankful for it, care for it, use it wisely, but also manage your money with the future in mind. So manage your money, manage what you have with the future in mind. Diligent planning and effort today is likely to result in good outcomes tomorrow. Like this, we know this to be true. And this isn't just true in finances, but if we diligently plan today, we are likely going to have more outcomes tomorrow. Again, back to health and nutrition. If somebody meal plans on a Sunday and they spend an hour or two cooking and they make their plans throughout the week, they are more likely going to stick to what they want to eat than the person who doesn't plan, realizes they're hungry, and passes a McDonald's and like, you know what? I deserve this, right? Diligent planning leads to good outcomes later. So in abundance of provision, in times of abundance and times of provision, you plan for scarcity. One of my favorite quotes of all time, discipline equals freedom. I've actually got this on a plaque in my office. Discipline equals freedom. And I have learned this quote to be universally true. If it's not true yet, I haven't discovered when it's not true, but discipline equals freedom. That if you discipline yourself to take the necessary steps to reach your goal, you'll have freedom within that. So if you discipline yourself by sticking to a budget, that budget actually provides you some freedom and flexibility within it to do what you want, to be able to get what you want without the guilt or the shame or missing out on certain things that you need. However, if you're careless with money, if you buy things you don't really need or have the extra money for, or you just buy what you really want now for instant gratification, instead of saving for what you really want in the future, you limit yourself with limited financial flexibility and health. And when you do that, you don't even have the option to do a lot of things. You don't have the option to be generous to those in need. You really don't even get the option to make a lot of your own financial choices at the end, because your choices are made for you when you have no money left, right? Like you can't do a lot. You can only make your choices for so long before your choices make you. We see more of this in Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs 6, verses 6 through 11. Go to the ant, O sluggard. Isn't that great? Like, hey, this guy's like, hey, go watch the person who's working. You lazy person, go look and see what they're doing. Go to the ant, O sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief officer or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. This is the writer of this proverb saying, don't be lazy. If you can work. Be wise with what you have. Plan for the future. The person who works diligently, who's able to work, the person who plans for the future, the person who is wise with what they have, they don't have to worry because they've made provision. They've made good decisions. They've got some tucked away. They are ready to weather the winter when it comes. But the person who's lazy, the person who has chosen not to work, isn't wise with their time and their resources, isn't wise with their abundance and times of provision like that, they do have reason to worry. Because then when something happens, when that emergency hits, when you lose your job, when your engine blows up, when your furnace goes out, like even if you've saved, those are going to be stressful situations, that unexpected medical expense. Even if you have saved and you've been wise, those are going to be stressful situations. Right? That's not what we call fun money. That's not fun money to spend. But they can be less stressful if we plan wisely in our times of abundance. They can be less stressful if we diligently plan today for what could come tomorrow. If you just blow it all without any regard to the future, then when those unexpected expenses do come, you're reliant on the generosity of others. And I think this is what so much of wise stewardship comes down to. Wise stewardship gives you the ability to be generous to others. Unwise stewardship requires you to rely on the generosity of others. If you're wise in your stewardship, you can be generous. If you're unwise in your stewardship, you rely on the generosity of others. So, what does this look like to intentionally, again, steward well? How is this practically lived out? As you see, we have some baskets. We have some play pit balls. This, God's money, right? This all belongs to God. We've already established everything in the world belongs to God, right? It's all His. He doesn't need money from you, but tithing is for you. It's how we show our dependence on Him. Psalm 24:1 says, "The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord." The earth and everything in it. This is God's. It's all His, right? Everything that you have is God's. Do you know what's included in the earth and everything in it? Your money. Everything, right? So when we practically live it out, we're going to go months. All right. So when we tithe, remember, we don't go at the end of the month, but first fruits. We're proactive and we're intentional in our discipleship. So first fruits, first tenth goes to God. We're going to go 12 months. So what? That's 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. January. All right. February, first fruits goes to God. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. March, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. April, you can hang with me for a minute. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. May. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. June, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, where are we at? July, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. August, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. September, thank you. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. October, thank you for proactively helping me there. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. Oh, but wait, there's more. See? God never runs out. No, I'm really lost. Thank you. Got really lost there. November, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. Did I do October, though? Yes. Okay. December. Thank you. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. All right. This is your salary in 1 year. This is what God has provided you with in 1 year here. This is the starting point. I want you to just tell me what you notice about these baskets. Like what strikes you here? The abundance of what God, how he blesses us, the difference between what God wants us to keep and gives us to manage on our own, what he allows us to use for our living expenses, pay the bills, hobbies, everything like that, versus how little he requires of us. Like it helps when you can see it visually, doesn't it? Now, 90% here of what the Lord blesses with us, he allows us to keep. And you look at this and you're like, oh, that's it? Like, that's all he wants? Yes. But this is what's really important. Being wise and stewarding well according to his word, doing this obedience, intentionality, and consistency. This right here, this basket must be here if we want God to bless us with this. Remember, we don't give expecting more in return. It's not prosperity theology, but we give, and as we do so, we show God that he can entrust us with what he blesses us with, and then he may give us more to then give us more that he entrusts us with because he knows he can trust us with the little that we had. Now, this could represent $40,000 or this could represent $400,000. It doesn't matter. But he requires this from what he provides to us. Now, as you grow and you have the opportunity, you might start doing this. Like, well, I don't need to spend all of this money on myself, so I'm going to save 10% of it. So how much was that, 12? Yeah. 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Look how full this still is. Right? Like there's some wisdom here. This is still yours, right? This isn't you didn't give this over to God. This isn't part of a tithing or you're just giving this money away. This is your diligent planning and effort. This is still yours. It's just set off to the side. This is an investment, 401k, maybe 529, help your kid pay for college. Like, this is still yours. This is still God's. And then this one is still pretty full. Like, this is 80-20 or 80-10-10. This is a good plan if you can get to it. Like, if you can get to this point, it's a good starting point as you're saving and planning for the future. One of the things that we say often here is life is about choices. You have the choice to make regarding your finances. We can make and we can keep and we can use 100% of what God blesses us with if that's the choice that we make, if that's what we desire. Or we can make the choice to be intentional and obedient and consistent with our giving, and we can make the choice to save for the future. Paul Tripp, he writes this in his book, Redeeming Money. We don't have a budget problem, we have a treasure problem. We don't have a financial problem, we have a kingship problem. We don't have a things problem, we have a heart problem. See, it's a choice to manage your finances well. It's a choice to manage them in alignment with how God instructs us in his word through Scripture, and it's a choice not to. Now, as you get older, I know depending on how much you're able to put in this basket, I think we recognize generally early adulthood, as you're getting started, you're lucky if you have anything left over at the end of the month, right? You're lucky if you have anything to save at the end. But as you get older and you start maybe, we'll just say generally speaking, as you get older, your salary goes up, you reach your highest earning years, things like that. And as your salary goes up, If you're not elevating your lifestyle, you constantly live below your means, which is wise practice, you're able to then put more into here. And of course, this still depends on the age of your kids, the season of life, your job, and everything like that. But then eventually, maybe you're able to take even more out of here and put it over here. Or out of your abundance, you're able to be generous with others. Now, this is dependent, but this right here, 90-10, this is the starting point. This is the choice that everybody can make and be at tomorrow if you were to choose to. It's hard. It takes intention. You might have to cut some things out. You might have to change the way that you do certain things or cut your own spending money. But again, this is a choice. Several years ago, early in our marriage, a church that Amy and I were attending at the time, this was long before I got involved in ministry or was on staff or anything, but as I was attending a church, they put on a study, Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. It was absolutely transformative to the way that we thought about money, the way that we managed our money, and the fact that we were able to go through that course in our early 20s was one of the best financial things that ever happened to us. And we had people in our lives that cared about us and were like, you need to be there, right? And as we went through that, it allowed us to begin practicing these principles for stewardship in our lives, and it made a world of difference, and it continues to. Like, I assure you, when it comes to your personal finances, God's plan works. It can be hard to get started. It may require a full 180 in how you manage your finances, but it is a choice that you can make should you desire to. We have a little participation thing I'm going to ask you to do. On your guide that you have, there's a QR code. On that QR code, if you can scan it, take your phone out, scan it, it's going to take you to a short survey for FPU. FPU, Financial Peace University, is Dave Ramsey's course. If you have never been through FPU, or you have, but maybe you forgot some of it, you want to start practicing it again, you want to start living in alignment with God's financial plan for your life, you want to discover what that looks like, we could offer that opportunity. We could offer FPU here if there were enough interest. It's anonymous. You don't have to put your name on it. You don't have to put your email or anything like that. We're just gauging the interest to see if that's something that we want to offer here for everybody. There's only 3 questions. Like I said, you don't have to put your name on it. It's super quick, super fast. But yes. Oh, dang it. All right, I'll try to fix that link. We'll do it again. I'll send a link out or post it or something like that. So if you follow us on Facebook, I'll put it on there. Or I'll just keep your guide with you. I'll try to mess with that link and see if it unlocks. But we just want to see, or you can reach out to me individually, tell me on your way out that, hey, I'd be interested in FPU. Gauge enough interest. It's not just about giving. It's not about getting your money out of your pocket and into the church. That's not what FPU is. It is about understanding God's plan financially for you. It helps with debt reduction, creating budgets, financial planning, really helping you get to a place of peace and healthily financially. And so if that's something that you want to do, just let me know. You can, like I said, you can tell me on the way out. But I know last week and this week were a little differently, or we're done a little different. I know when we talk about money, especially if this is your first time or your second time with us, you're like, is this all they talk about? No, like this. But again, this is an issue of primary concern, and so we want to be able to talk about it, and we want to be able to do so biblically informed. So I hope that last week and this week, I hope they blessed you. I hope they were a benefit to you. I hope they at least challenged you maybe to think about your stewardship and your finances differently if you weren't living in alignment or you had never even heard this before. But this only makes sense if you know and you believe the gospel. Like if you don't know Jesus, this doesn't make sense. Like, why would I give money to be part of the kingdom mission, kingdom worship, and kingdom workers? Why would I give money to that if it's something I don't believe in anyway? And you're right, it doesn't make any sense for you at all. But if you want to know why knowing Jesus matters, if you want to know why that's significant, and how Jesus has a plan for your, not just your money, but for your life, I would love to have that conversation with you. I'd love to talk to you about why Jesus has a plan for your life holistically, and not just your life now, but your life for all eternity. Let's pray.